Let's get real. Welcome to TBC Today. This podcast features friends in and around the Triad Baptist Church community. Hear encouraging real-life stories from our weekly guests and inspiring insights from our host, Pastor Rob. To learn more about Triad Baptist Church in Kernersville, North Carolina, visit us online at tbcnow.org.
Welcome to this episode of TBC Today. We're doing something a little bit different with this episode. We're going to talk to David Grochowski, and then in our next episode, we're going to talk to his wife, Amy. So I think that'll be pretty interesting. Now, David attended the Word of Life Bible Institute and then later Piedmont International University. He's a former chaplain at Winston-Salem Rescue Mission, a Sunday school teacher, and is currently in remission for cancer, and that's one of the things that we want to talk about. David was just telling Pastor Rob, they've been here about 18 years at Triad Baptist, so that's pretty good. You've got a good retention rate there. So if you want, let's get this conversation started.
All right, David, thank you for being here. We're going to start the sands of time.
All right.
And I know you still are dealing with treatments and recovery and getting your strength back, but we'd like to kind of go back in your life. Where were you born?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And what was it like growing up in Pittsburgh?
Gray. The weather is really dreary there in Pennsylvania. They have an average of 53 sunny days a year. So
That's it?
yeah. It's.
I was born in Pittsburgh General, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Congratulations.
my dad was going to school at Pittsburgh University. So
Okay.
you grew up there to be, when did you leave? How old were you when you left?
24, 25 when I moved away from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
I'd gone to Word of Life in Florida, as you mentioned, right after high school. So it was
Did
a year
your
in
church
Florida.
promote that?
Yes, yeah. My youth pastor had been to Word of Life, and then my small group leader, he'd also been to Word of Life. So when that came up, they were very supportive. That was a great idea, and I really enjoyed it.
Is that where you got a calling, or did anything happen there significant?
Oh, definitely. My time there helped me. I hadn't been a believer super long, a couple of years. I got saved when I was about 15. And so that helped me establish a daily devotional, for one. My devotions before that was hit and miss. So every morning, you spend time in the Word, you spend time in prayer. So they got that habit built into my life. Helped me develop a love for the Scriptures, for God's Word. I mean, we spent 4 or 5 hours a day in class hearing from different professors, teaching the Word of God. And I loved it. I did 1 year. And I wanted to go back and do a second year, get more Bible instruction. And as we'll get to later, I ended up at Piedmont for that. But yeah, Word of Life really impacted my life.
So you ended up only doing 1 year, or you did 2?
I only did the 1 year at Word of Life.
And then you started looking for a college, a seminary, or what?
Well, I came home from Word of Life and actually went to just a public university. It was Cal U there outside of Pittsburgh. And wasn't still sure what I wanted to do. I didn't have a clear calling to ministry yet. So I was my folks thought I would be a good school teacher. And so I went to Cal U, and my first year there as a school teacher, next 2 years as a business major, thought about being a small business owner. And I'd gone to Word of Life for a year, and then I did 1 year as a business major, 2 years as a teaching major. So I'm 4 years in college, and I'm still 2 years away from finishing my bachelor's degree. I'm like, oh, man. So a friend of mine from the same church, she went to Word of Life, came home. All of her Word of Life credits transferred, and none of mine did. So I went in and asked them, I said, how come her credits counted and mine don't? And they said, oh, well, Word of Life just got an accreditation we recognize. Get us your transcripts, and we'll count them. And so I had 53 credits from Word of Life transfer in, and I was able to just roll that into, end up with a liberal arts degree. And because by then I knew I wanted to go to Piedmont. And I thought I was going to Piedmont to finish a bachelor's. But when all those credits came in, I was able to finish my bachelor's there and then go to Piedmont for a master's.
How about that? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So you ended up at Piedmont, and did anything special happen there?
Of course, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Let's see, we moved in January. I remember it was freezing cold. I thought I left the cold behind in Pittsburgh. But, her Amy's dad helped us move into the dorm there on campus. And I was there for about 2 years working on an MA in Biblical Studies. Started attending here. Got a phone call one evening from a head deacon at a church in Moxville saying, I hear you're looking for a ministry position. We'd like to give you an interview. I hadn't been looking, so I don't know where he got that from. And I said, I haven't been looking. He said, oh, I'm sorry, never mind. I said, well, wait, this might be the Lord's leading in my life. Let me pray about it. And, went from there, went and did the interview. And so I was part-time youth pastor at Knatzer Baptist Church for a little over 3 years.
Were you already married?
Yes.
How did y'all get together?
Well, me and Amy met in Pittsburgh. She was doing travel nursing.
Huh.
So if there's anyone don't know a lot about travel nursing, it's where you sign up with a travel agency. They find the employment, they find the housing, they provide everything. You just go to the city, they show up, you show up, they've got taken care of everything. It's 16 weeks, they move on. And she thought, oh, this would be great. I want to go to Dallas. I'm going to go to San Francisco. I'm going to see these great world-class cities. And the first place they sent her is Pittsburgh. And she's like, who wants to go to Pittsburgh? But she's like, I'll do my 16 weeks and I'll move on. But the first thing she did when she got to Pittsburgh was she looked for a church home to attend. And she found 3 churches that she wanted to try. And she went and visited the first 2. And then the third church was the church where I was attending. And it was kind of up on a hill. You couldn't see it from the road. And so it was a Wednesday night service. It's after dark. She drives down the road looking for this church, and she realizes she passed it. So she turns around, she drives back. She passed it again. So she turns around, she goes back a third time. She passed it a third time. She says, Lord, if you want me to go to this church, you got to help me find it. And if I don't find it, I'm going home. And so she's driving back, and she just happened to notice, right, there's the sign. The church is up on the hill. She just turned in up on the hill. And she really liked the church, so she started attending there. She got involved with the youth. I'd gone to Word of Life and came back, and so I was helping with the youth. So that's kind of how we met. And then the youth group would go on mission trips to New York City with a sister church there in Spanish Harlem. And so we chaperoned 2 of those mission trips together, and it was on that mission trip together.
Oh, wow.
We
Hit it off.
went from a friendship to, yeah.
Something a little more
special.
romantic.
That's right. Yep.
That's cool. And so you guys did you get married up there?
We did. Yeah, we got married there in 2003, December 12th. We had a nice Christmas wedding. Church was beautifully decorated. I highly recommend it.
Save some money.
That's right. And so we were there for about a year after getting married, and then that's when we moved down to Winston-Salem. So I could go
And
to
going on a
Piedmont.
master's of biblical studies or something?
Yeah.
Okay, and what were you thinking in your head at that time? Like, were you already thinking, I'm going to go into ministry full time, I don't know what I'm going to do? Or did you have some ideas in your head?
I just knew that I wanted to know the Word better. I wanted to know the Scriptures better. I wanted to get a better relationship even with the Lord. I knew that what I experienced, growth-wise at Word Life, I needed more of that. I wanted more of that. That was a direction my life had to head. And Piedmont was going to provide that. It was going to help me to know the Scriptures better, to know the Lord better. I didn't have, a great vision for where I was going to go. I knew being faithful required, this is the next step.
Did you start to feel, though, yourself, I'm going to go into ministry? This is what I want to do with my
At some
life?
point, yeah. The more I studied and learned as I grew, I started to
So
feel that.
how did that happen? How did you start out in ministry?
Actually, back in Pittsburgh, at the church there, we were helping with the youth, and I really felt like that was, what God was, just how He was working in my life at the time, working with the youth there. So coming down to Piedmont, the Lord just opened the right door for me. I mean, like I said, the head deacon just gave me a phone call, and that's where I was for the next 3.5 years.
Wow.
So getting to pour my life into young folks, guys who are going through, especially the young guys who they're in a difficult stage of life. Mid-teens can be very tumultuous.
Yeah.
And, one of the teens in particular had a difficult childhood growing up. We really connected well. And the Lord used me to help kind of direct his life. He went to Piedmont. Now he's in the ministry. And just feels like that's some of the fruit there of ministry.
Great.
It's been good.
That's cool. So you head for this master's, you finish it up. You went back there for 3.5 years after that? Or you were already, the master's was later?
I finished the master's while I was a youth pastor.
Okay.
And then while I was a youth pastor, from there, I was doing part-time youth pastoring and then volunteer teaching at Alpha Acres, which was a ministry of the Winston-Salem Rescue Mission.
You ran Alpha Acres.
I just taught there. I just volunteer taught there.
I see.
They needed a Bible teacher twice a week.
And then
Tuesdays
did that work
Thursdays.
into something?
It did, yeah. I was out there teaching for about 2-3 months, and then I remember who it was. It may have been Dan Parsons, may have been Greg Cooney. Said, we've got a position open at downtown location that we think you'd be a good fit for. We'd like for you to come interview for it. So I came down, I did the interview, and they said, no, you're not who we need for this position. About a month later, they called me back and said, we've got another position that we think you'd be even better for. We'd like for you to come and interview for that. That was the chaplain position, the 90-day program. So I interviewed for chaplain, and that's when I said, they offered me the position. And so I transitioned from youth pastor to chaplain in the 90-day program.
And how long you stay at that, and then you got promotion, didn't you?
I was 4 years as chaplain, and just an amazing ministry. You're seeing guys come directly off the street into the rescue mission. They're coming in with a backpack, and that's it. You help them check in. You show them to their room. You make sure they get their first meal. You share the gospel with them. That first day they're there, you sit down, you share the gospel with them, because they might leave that night and not hear the gospel. So that's when Dan Parsons at the mission hired me. It's one of the things he said. He says, David, I want you to make sure every man that comes through that door hears the gospel. And so that was my prime directive while I was there, was every man that came in, the first chance I got, I either when it was checking them in or within a day or two. I mean, it was, you come see Chaplain Dave at such and such time, and I would share the gospel, had the privilege of leading men to Christ. I knew that in order for me to be really effective in that ministry with such difficult cases, these men, I needed to be better at connecting with them and having more to offer them. Not like the gospel is something that's not being offered, or it's something small. But part of it is you do kind of got to work up to that. You need to establish some common ground, especially with someone who's been homeless. They can be very standoffish. There's a lot of trauma in someone's life who's been homeless. So my wife, Amy, had started attending your counseling classes. And when she was telling me the things she was learning in your class, I said to myself, that's exactly what I need. It was the counseling and theology class, the first one. I thought, I have to have that. That is so applicable to what I'm doing. And so that's when I talked to my manager at the Rescue Mission, says I want to go sit in on these classes. Since I was an alumni, I could just sit in on the lectures for minimal cost. I had to use my lunch break at the mission, so I would go in the mornings. On my lunch break, I'd scoot over to Piedmont, sit through class, come back, finish my shift. And those 5 counseling classes of yours I sat through just grew me so much, and in my ability to connect with these men in order to teach and to counsel, to see and identify traumas, to help them see their traumas, help them see how what they've been through affects the decisions that they're making today. And how do I change my thinking so that I can live a life that's pleasing to God, that's productive in society, reconnect with family. So those first 4 years at the Rescue Mission as chaplain was a massive period of growth for me in my life.
And
also
pure
developed a passion.
discipleship, almost pure discipleship as far as really being right into someone's life, and you guys were literally carrying each other's lives through that time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you got a promotion into something. What did you do after that?
They asked me to go from being chaplain in the 90-day program to managing the 1-year program. The 1-year program is kind of the flagship program of the rescue mission. Those men commit to 1 year of staying at the mission, so their mindset is more long-term. If a guy goes through the 90-day program and he says, look, I've been an addict for 20 years. I know if I get an apartment and a place of my own, it won't take long. I'll relapse. I need more recovery and more clean time. That's with the 1-year program. They apply to that. They come over, they get more counseling, they get more classes. It's more clean time, it's more work therapy. And then after they finish the 1-year program, there's even more support for what they do next, whether that's going to college. We've had guys work on master's degrees while in that program. or just go to school for welding, or just find employment, start saving up paychecks so that you can afford a place of your own when it's time to go.
So do you see your life, if it could have gone on the way it would have, you would have been there still doing the program, still moving forward and loving it?
That's where I expect I would be, that's right. The last 2 years I was there, they asked me to be director of programs. So when I started, I was in charge of Alpha Acres, the 90-day program, and the 1-year program.
So tell us about like when you started having the health issues and where that led. And
So July of, not last year, the year before, so 2021, my left ear had filled up with fluid on the inside. My inner ear filled with fluid. So it's like you had swimmer's ear. I could hear it sloshing around. There was fullness in my ear. And so I went to an ENT, made an appointment with the ENT to get it checked out. Why is my ear? It turns out it just wasn't draining. The tube from the ear to the throat, the eustachian tube, wasn't draining. So I made an appointment. I go in. They put what feels like mace, hot pepper spray up your nose to numb it. It burns terribly. And they looked up there. The lady, I remember she looked. She pulled out. She says, "I'll be right back." She leaves the room. Another doctor comes in. He takes a look. He puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "We're going to have to do a biopsy for cancer. The skin has grown completely over the opening of the tube. That's why it's not draining. So I'm going to numb you up, and we'll do what's called a needle biopsy. We'll just put a needle in there and just draw it a little bit." And so he numbs me up, and then they just leave me in the room by myself for the next 15, 20 minutes. And my head is just spinning. I'm thinking, oh no, cancer. And I'm just, and the first thought that helped me to start calming down, to come down out of this atmosphere that I was in, was I am so glad that my sins are paid for. That brought me back down to reality. Okay, I'm going to be okay regardless of what this is. In the end, it'll be all right. So he came in, did the biopsy. The next week and a half, we're hoping and praying it's not cancer. The results came back inconclusive. So we need you to come back in. So I had to make another appointment. They had to do another biopsy. This time they removed hunks of flesh from up in my sinuses, sent those off for another biopsy. We're waiting again. The waiting was tough. You're hoping and praying this isn't cancer, and it was. It comes back. So we go in for a meeting with the doctor, and he was so kind, and he was very, very generous in his ability to just to be nice to me. I really felt cared for, and he said it's cancer. My wife asked about the staging, and he felt the lymph nodes in my neck, and he says, well, it's at least stage 2. I'm going to refer you to a radiologist for radiation treatment. And we meet with we did a PET scan and an MRI here in Kernersville. And during that whole time, we're hoping and praying that it hasn't spread very far. But it had. It had metastasized to my liver and to my hip bone. So when we met with the radiologist, finally, she looked at the PET scans and she says, "This is too far gone. I can't help you. I'm going to refer you to chemotherapy." And she said, "And the rest is up to God." The doctor said that. The rest is up to God. So a few weeks go by, we get in with the oncologist. And during this time, you're thinking, am I seeing the right people? Am I in the right place? What do you do? But my oncologist has been wonderful. She has been so good. And that helped us to know. It was like the Lord saying, yeah, this is the right person. This is who I want you seeing.
What's an example of something that she was so good?
When I first met with her, I was so emotionally overwhelmed by you very well could be in the last months of your life.
Did you feel yourself shutting down, or were you
I couldn't even bear to hear her talking about my prognosis and my treatment. So I put headphones on, and she talked to Amy. She laid it all out for Amy. And she showed Amy the scan. I couldn't even look at the scans. I mean, it's just, we've described it this way. You feel like you're drowning. You know, when David in the Psalms talks about God's waves rolling over him, that's exactly what it feels like. I felt like I'm trapped underwater. It's at least 10 feet up, and those waves are huge. That's what it felt like. I felt like I'm drowning. It was in those moments that I learned how to cry out to God. And it's amazing. Every single time I cried out to him, he comforted me. It was as if God just washed peace over my soul. I would be on the verge of, I feel like a breakdown. I can't do this. I'm going to fall apart. I would cry, I would beg, and I'd beg, oh God, I can't take this. And he just, it's like when Christ said, peace, be still to the storm. Yeah. And I kept track of those moments. I started counting. I was like, God, this is, and then the second time I felt that way, I'm drowning, God, peace would be still. I counted to 13 times in a row. I got to that point where I was beside myself, just begging for him, and he would just come in and just the peace would pour over my soul. So I quit counting at 13. I'm like, he's faithful. And,
I'd have got to 14. That's an unlucky number, but that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. Just that experience of a walk with God in the middle of that, and that's what it's like. And it's just so, I think of Psalm 42 where it says, as the deer pants after the water brook, so my soul thirsts after you. You know, I have got to come and appear before you. I need you to be there for me.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing. So, did you get through that session okay, or were you like that piece?
Really.
You're still struggling in and out?
For a while, it took me a long time to get to where I could talk at this level about the cancer and about what it means for my life and how it's affected me. At the time, it was traumatic.
The thing I most remember, let me just interject, is what you would say about, I may not be a father to my children. That seemed, and you know, to your wife too. I can't be a husband and a father, and that seemed to be the most demoralizing, could strip away that joy from you.
Absolutely.
Just thinking I could die at this age, and my kids aren't even grown yet.
Who's going to take care of my kids?
Yeah.
And I love both my boys so much, and we didn't get into it much, and that's fine. But I had very little father figure growing up. My mom and dad split when I was very young. My mom remarried, but the guy she married was an alcoholic. We only lived with him for 2 years. They stayed married for a long time, but separated. And I was determined that was not going to be, my kids. They weren't going to go through that. It's part of what I loved about Amy so much. We talked about what we wanted our marriage to be like before we got married. She was as committed to, what our family would be as I was, if not more so. And I just, the thought of my boys having to go through some of what I went through growing up, it was overwhelming.
How old are your boys?
They're 14 and 16.
Okay.
Now,
So, yeah.
So at the time they were middle school.
Yeah.
but
12
even
and-
so, knowing your life well enough to know, I can say this, that was one control factor for you. I'm going to control because I grew up in that. My kids will never see that. And the very thing you wanted to control, you couldn't control. And so you almost see those images of yourself, and now it's going to happen to my boys.
Yeah.
That's almost unbearable to think about. They could be treated the way I was if they get the wrong person.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And so God literally took that hope away from you. He literally said, okay, again, it's going to have to be you trust me and not what you're counting on to be the father that you never had.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even be that.
That is probably one of the most significant lessons that I've learned through this whole thing is God's faithfulness. I will provide, I will take care of you. Because that's kind of a part of who I am, independent. I can do this. I'm a DIYer. I don't take my cars to a mechanic unless it's for an inspection. I'll change a transmission if I have to. I can do it myself. I've had to. It's kind of just been my my approach to life. I'll do it. Now, is there faith and to trust the Lord? Sure, but if I can handle it, I want to. I'm hands-on. I want to do it. This cancer, these treatments, have put me in a position where I can't do anything. I mean, I have found myself so deflated. I mean, I've never had such low energy in my entire life. I mean, I've told you before, there was a period where I would go from my bed to my recliner and back to my bed, and that was all I had energy for. I felt like I had lead in my bones. And I go from being, I got to take care of the car, and I got to, fix the roof on the house, and I got to mow the lawn, and I've got to do all these things that I said I can't do any of it, none of it. I got so bad. I mean, I couldn't shower. I couldn't bathe myself. I had to use a walker. This is another actually example of God's good hand upon my life. I'd gotten blood clots in my calf. The chemotherapy, right before Thanksgiving of 2021, the chemo had caused blood clots in my calf muscle. I was in the hospital for 5 days. It's painful, and those blood clots went through my heart into my lungs at least twice, and they absolutely could have died. They brought in they had to take images of my heart to check for damage. They didn't find any damage whatsoever. But I had to use a walker when I came home. I had to use a shower chair. Couldn't get through a shower. The rehab from the blood clots and the chemotherapy, it had me so low, so completely devoid of energy and strength.
And how many months were you at your lowest point or your weakest point?
Incapacitated.
Yeah. Well, the chemotherapy was almost 6 months. I think it was like 5 months and 3 weeks. And that worked in cycles. They were 3-week cycles. So the first week I had 2 different types of chemotherapy. I had cisplatin and Gemazar. Cisplatin's been around for 40 years. It's an old school chemo, and it's heavy duty. It's the one that knocked me down. I remember the chemo nurse would come into the little room there where they would administer the chemo, the IV, and they'd be like, man, that's a big bag of chemo. It would take 60 minutes just for it to go in. So the first week was 2 chemos, and I would be so sick. I'd be so nauseated. It was like having flu and COVID at the same time, just awful, sick. I could barely eat. I could eat like a small dish of canned peaches. I could maybe get half of that down. You got to keep your fluids up because the chemo medicines will destroy your kidneys. So there's a minimum amount of water you got to drink. And I got to where I couldn't even drink enough water. So I was going in. Amy would take me back to the cancer center, and they'd just hook me up to bags of fluid, and I'd get those put in. So that would be week 1. Week 2, about 8 days really, I'd start to get a little bit of relief from the nausea. And I know it's a lot. The chemo, the meds that they gave you for the nausea are repurposed psych meds, and so they're messing with you up here as well. And some of the meds to help with the nausea while I sleep, I couldn't wake up from it. The whole morning the next day till like 1-2 o'clock, I'd be so groggy. And then you'd go back for the second. Week 2 would be just the 1 chemo, which wasn't as powerful, or at least it wasn't as nauseating. And then week 3 was a rest week. You get a week off. Oh, those rest weeks were great. Just wasn't sick. And then you do it again. And what I did about 12. I think I did 12 cycles. Is that right?
Wow.
12 cycles. And then it was from there, I don't know where you want to go next, but from the next stage was we did a PET scan about halfway through the chemo cycles, and I remember the oncologist walking in the room, and the first words out of her mouth were, "It's gone. We can't find it." The tumors were completely gone. They didn't show up anywhere on the entire scan.
Were you surprised?
Absolutely surprised. Yeah, the plan was, I didn't make this clear earlier, from the radiologist, she says, I'm going to send you over to chemo. Chemo's going to do what they can. If they get it down small enough, maybe you can come back to me and maybe you'll be at the point where I can treat you. This was never expected that it would be completely gone, that this was going to do it. So when she walked in, she said, I can't find anything. It was amazing. She said, yeah, it is amazing. And unfortunately, you have to finish the cycles, though. I mean, it was scheduled 12 cycles, so you have to do them all. And they get harder as you go along. You get sicker each time. I feel like they keep putting in chemo until they just figure you can't take any more. Because that's where I was at. That last one was so hard, and you're so worn out, and so tired, and sick of being tired.
Were you already being treated for Bar Epstein at that point at the end of that cycle? You weren't. That wasn't even in the picture yet.
Nah.
So it took how long to recover from that?
Never fully recovered from that. I started doing therapy at Novant's Rehabilitation Center, exercise, trying to get some stamina built back up. After about 4 months, I was starting to feel like, okay, you know what, there might be some normalcy after this. I was still really tired, though. I had anemia. My iron was low. I had to go do a couple iron transfusions. My white blood cell counts were really low, so I had to take some injections to boost my white blood cell count. And then after about 4 or 5 months, it was time for another scan. And unfortunately, the scan showed that the cancer came right back. So I didn't get much of a break in between. Now, it had come back just in the primary tumor and in the lymph nodes in my neck. So I remember that day as well, the doctor comes in and she says, we're going to have to radiate. And radiation was very difficult. I had to do 35 radiation treatments. So it's Monday through Friday. It's 5 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You're over there every day, and they put you in a machine. The machine was very difficult. You have to get a mask for the head and neck. They call it a mask. And so you go in, and they have this like plastic mesh that they've heated up in hot water, and they lay you down on a table, and they lay this hot plastic mesh, and it just goes from here all the way up over your head, and then they just start pushing it all the way down around you, and then there's a frame, they snap it onto it, and then you lay there and wait for it to cool, and as it cools, it tightens ever so slightly, and that they have to keep you locked into place while the radiation machine is treating, because it's a very precise beam that they're using, and if you move just a little bit, it throws it off. It's not hitting the right area, so they've got to lock you into place. And so, when I'm being fitted for this mask, then they got to do an X-ray to make sure everything's appropriate, and so they start snapping it into place on the table. So I snap, snap, snap all the way. From my shoulders up, I'm being locked into a table. I can't move my head. It's tight around my throat. There's a piece that goes into your mouth to hold your tongue down. And I had to ask them to take it off. I can't do this. This is too hard. Give me a moment. Let me catch my breath. And so they took it off. I sat up. I sat there for a few minutes. I said, okay, you think you can try it now? I said, okay. So they lay back down. They snap me in. They get the X-rays. I got through it. They take it off. I got to come back in 2 weeks to start the treatments. During that time, we received a phone call from someone, I think in insurance, and she's asking her questions, and then we kind of get to just a conversation with this lady, and it turns out her husband died of cancer. Wow. He was supposed to do something very similar to what I was supposed to do. He had to go into a tight tunnel. And this lady on the phone, she said he couldn't do it. It was too claustrophobic. He couldn't do it. He didn't get treated, and so he died from his cancer. And so I go to do my first treatment, and they do an X-ray every time. I had 35 X-rays and then 35 radiation treatments. So they X-ray you, and then they treat you, and they leave the room. I mean, they can't stay in there while you're in this machine. So they snap me down, and I had to have them take it off again. It's It's terrifying to be completely locked down on this table. You cannot move your head and neck. And I was afraid that I was going to be like that lady's husband. I'm not going to get through this. And this is it. This is going to get me. And that's when I came up with an idea. I said, when I get locked in, to help get my mind off of being locked in and this machine going over me, I'm going to pray for somebody else. So I prayed for someone else that first day, and it got me through. You know, it was 20 minutes. It was twice as long as it would be every other time. There would only be about 10 minutes going forward, but those 10 minutes felt like an hour. So I'd pray for someone else. So I went home and I made a list. I wrote 35 people down. I put the dates beside those 35 treatments. I put 35 families, couples, friends, people. And every treatment I go in, I'd spend my time locked into that mask praying for somebody else. And that got me through. I eventually got to where I could calm down enough I wasn't terrified of that mask. Part of what I figured out, sounds simple, was just breathe. In the nose, out the mouth, just breathe. Okay, I can breathe. I can't move my head, I can't move my neck, I can't move my shoulders, I can't get myself off this table if I need to, but I can breathe. So I'll be all right until they come back in. And that's what got me through. I had 2 chemo treatments, 2 chemo cycles to do while I was doing radiation. That was about the sickest I'd ever been. I'm getting chemo and radiation at the same time. That was pretty rough. But wow. The lesson here is the Lord has got me through it. He's getting me through this.
So where are you now?
Well, you know, my prayers have changed for sure. I used to say, God, I can't do this. I can't do this without you. I need you. And now my prayers are, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, I've turned that over. Health-wise, I'm in remission currently. I have no scan coming up. The virus that has caused this cancer, the Epstein-Barr virus, I'm on a medication that seems to be effective at suppressing the Epstein-Barr. But as far as we know, as far as my doctor knows, there's nobody else on the planet taking this medication for this purpose. My wife, Amy, realized that if we can control this virus, we can lower my chances of reoccurrence, the cancer coming back. So she got online. She started looking at what's out there to treat Epstein-Barr. There's nothing, really. A lot of people have it. 98% of the human race has Epstein-Barr virus, but it's like chickenpox. You get it when you're young, it goes dormant, and if it doesn't come back, you're fine. For some people, it does, something wakes it up, it comes back, you get MS. In my case, it turned into cancer. So she, and this was a God thing, she found a study online for this antiviral that's being used for other viruses, showed in a lab the potential to treat Epstein-Barr. So she sent that study to my oncologist, and that's, again, another one of the ways where we're at the right people. My oncologist was willing to look at that and say, okay, let's try this. And that has kept my Epstein-Barr, my viral load was at 80,000 when I went in the first time. After chemo, it had gone down to, I think, about 1,300. When my cancer came back, it had started climbing again. And then the first test for how much Epstein-Barr virus is in my system, after I started that medicine, it came back undetected. Couldn't find it whatsoever. Now it's bumped up a little bit. It came back around 300, and then this last time it was back down to 0. We can't find it. So
it's amazing.
A little bit there.
You're not really considered a cancer survivor until so many years. Is that how they do it? Or do you consider what now you're a survivor?
I mean, they've called me a survivor at the cancer center.
It's amazing.
So.
Just to kind of put it in perspective, because we're going to close it out here, we'll probably put this into 2 sessions.
Okay.
So one thing, the thing that stuck with me most as you were telling the last story is the phrase, just breathe. That just seems to be your book title. Just breathe. I mean, because that's overwhelming. Claustrophobia. I've dealt with people who get severe depression or claustrophobia, and to try to work them through that is very difficult, like in severe depression. someone won't even want to get out of bed. And you've probably had similar feelings of just giving up, And one thing that's always encouraged you to do is do what you know you can do. And so for severe depression, get up and brush your teeth. I don't want to brush my teeth. Get up and do it. Yeah. The simple things. And it's like I could see you just being reduced to nothing but breathing in your nose and out your mouth. And that's unbelievable. That kind of was that, and the prayer is the things that got you through. It's like you had to find something to hold on to and stay with it. And it really got you through. It's an amazing story. I don't even remember hearing any of those before, but that is absolutely amazing, incredible. Anything you want to say to us as we close it out? Like, is there anything you would say to anyone who has cancer or not cancer? Just what would be the things that you'd want to...
Going through trauma, still doing my devotions every morning. The Psalms were just amazing. I can tell you how many, I'm going to memorize that. Or it's like so many of those Psalms, especially when David's crying out, like, God, I've got nothing, or, I'm emptied. I could really identify with some of those Psalms, and the Lord really used those to get me through. One Psalm in particular, Psalm 27, verse 1, says, the Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life, whom shall I dread? And I thought, that's why, God, I need you to defend my life. I'm literally dying here. You're the defense of my life. And I wrote that down on a note card, and I had that with me. Every chemo treatment that I went to, every meeting with the oncologist, that note card was in my pocket. And that's my best advice. Spend time in the Psalms.
You think about those words, and it's like they're jumping off the page because it's like the Spirit of God speaking to you through the person of Christ. That's exactly what I'm going to be to you. And, you can't get that. That's why people go to the Psalms. There's just packed with the emotion of being in that struggle. But you have to be in the struggle to get there. And nobody wants to go into the struggle. And just to hear you talk about that, I'd rather have you tell me about it than to in any way approach any of that. But really, out of your story then becomes God writing your story, where someone who doesn't go through that has no written story by God. And I really see that in your life, God writing your story in ways that it's just unbelievable to me.
Yeah. It's amazing. Great story.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, I'm exhausted.
Wow, I know.
I haven't even talked, and I'm exhausted.
That was a pretty incredible story, and it's just great to know that, we serve a pretty incredible God, so that's great. If you'd like to know more about Dave and his family, reach out to us here at Triad Baptist Church. Visit us online at tbcnow.org, and make sure you like and share this episode with your friends and family. Have a great week.
Thanks for joining us this week on TBC Today. We want to connect with you, so make sure to visit our website, tbcnow.org, and subscribe, rate, and review the show in iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend, and be on the lookout for our next conversation.